Welcome back to my channel. In today's sewing tutorial, I'm going to be making these Floppy Bunny soft toys. Plushies, DIY, stuffies, whatever you want to call them. They are beyond cute and perfect for the season. Large Floppy Bunny measures about 14 inches when sitting up and about 14 to 15 inches across from arm to arm. And how cute is this squishy tail in the back? And the small one sitting up measures about 9 to 10 inches and from arm to arm about 10 inches. So if you'd like the patterns, go ahead and click on the link in the description of the video, and there are 2 patterns there available, and you're actually buying the course. So this is the small pattern, no taping involved, and here, the larger pattern, there are 12 pages to print that you will tape together just like this in order. And of course, if you don't want to tape it together, you can also have the copy shop version, which you just bring over to any copy shop and they print it for you. So I'll be making the large Floppy Bunny for this tutorial. Of course, the small is made just the same. So here are the pieces that I have already cut out and taped together. The inner ear, the outer ear, and the muzzle. And of course, the nose. We'll talk about that later. The face side, the head back, the front head, the top arm, the underarm, and the foot pad, the outer leg, the inner leg, the bunny tail, and of course the torso. So I've used a white Sherpa fleece here that I've got at Joann's Fabric. And then for the muzzle, I just had a scrap piece of fleece, which worked perfectly. This is just cotton. And this is a vintage quilted fabric that I absolutely love and thought will make a great ear. Now for the nose, like I said before, we're going to talk about this after. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my Sherpa fabric to the wrong side facing up, and I'm going to trace all of my patterns. So for all the pieces that are not symmetrical or asymmetrical like this one, and you have to cut 2 out, you're going to cut 1 this way, and then you're going to cut 1 flipped over this way. So watch along as I do mine before you cut yours. And so I like to cut plush and fleeces like this. So I'm going to use a really thin marker that I know does not bleed. And I put my pattern weights, which are just washers from my hardware store, and I'm tracing along. But if you don't want to do it this way, you can also pin straight down to the fabric, and then you can use your shears and cut right along here, or you can even trace it and cut along and remove it. It's totally up to you. I find best for myself that I just have it weighted down. I trace with my very thin marker that I know does not bleed through, and I cut. Just make sure you don't use a Sharpie or anything like that because you don't want to mess up your fabric. Next, I'm going to take the same inner and outer leg and flip them over. And here we go. I'm going to trace it this way. So here is how I'm going to mark the eye mark for the face side. I'm going to use a pin. I'm going to stick it straight through the dot there, or that black circle, just a regular straight pin. And then I'm going to lift the pattern wherever I see my spot being held with the straight pin. I'm going to just make my dot there. So now I know that that's where I'm going to put my plastic eye for the rabbit. For the tail, we're going to cut this on a fold. So you're going to fold your fabric right sides together, and then you're going to place your pattern where it says fold right here, right against the fold line of your fabric. You'll pin it down or use weights, whatever is best for you, and you will cut around just the arch. You won't cut where it says fold line, and then you get a perfect circle. To cut the foot pad, I did fold my fabric right sides together so that I cut once and I get two pieces. And then for these little marks here, what I do is I make little snippet marks with my, or snippet cuts with my shears, so that these serve as a matching point when we are adding it and attaching it to the leg of the Floppy bunny. So my pattern doesn't include how to lay out your pattern pieces. So here is what I did and how I laid it out on the 1 yard of fabric, which is plenty of room for all the pattern pieces. And for the torso, what I like to do to save myself time when sewing is to mark wherever I wrote tummy. I tried to write tummy there and back here, arm and leg. So when sewing, it actually saves me so much time. And then of course I did the same thing, flipped over for one of these versions. And the rest of the pieces you can see I laid out all this way. And I forgot to mention and add where the two dots are on the bunny back to leave an opening for stuffing. So go ahead and mark those on your pattern piece. And now I'm going to cut out all the pieces. And here are all of the pieces for the Floppy bunny cut out. The first thing I'm going to make are the ears. So here is a completed one that I made, and now I'll make another one here for you so you know exactly how to put it together. I'm going to first fold the flaps together so the edges here are together just like this. And then once they're sewn together, what you're going to do is you're going to sew the arch there on top. So here's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to bring this, I'll show this to you on the paper pattern. I'm going to sew this first, and then once it's sewn together, I'm going to fold it over here and sew over the arch. And I'm going to do that using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I love using my fabric clips when sewing plush or Sherpa fleece like this or anything kind of chunky. So again, I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance with about a 3 lengths stitch length. Next, I'm going to clip the inner ear and follow this curve here. But what I like to do first is start at the bottom and match the ends. And then the point comes all the way up to the center seam there. And then again, back over to my sewing machine, what I'm going to do is sew around the outer ear piece with a 1/4 inch seam allowance as I backstitch on the ends. Next, I'm going to fold the bottom just like this and just give it a quick back and forth straight line here. And there we go, 2 ears complete. The next thing I'm going to do is take the front head piece and I'm going to sew this, what looks like sort of like a dart. So I'm going to bring that together and just sew right along, back stitching on the ends. And I won't even bring you over to the sewing machine because it's so easy. And there we go, done. Next, I'm going to take the face sides and the curves here. I'm just going to match them on the corners and then sew again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Next, the head back pieces, these right here, I'm going to sew together where the back of the head is. So the straighter side, I'm going to pin together and again sew with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching on the ends. Now, using the center seam there, we're going to use that to place the ears. So see how I took the first ear and I placed them right sides together and I'm lining it up to that center seam, or what was that rounded dart. And I'm going to clip this first ear here and then the next ear right next to it, so you find that seam right in between the ears. And I'm just going to do a straight stitch right across the top of the ears just to hold them in place, so it makes it easier when I'm doing the rest of my sewing. Now that the ears are attached, I'm going to take the back of the head and I'm going to match the center seams, both center seams together from the head and the back of the head. And I'm going to clip there first because you always want your seams to match. Next, I like to take the corners and I'm going to match the corners first. Clip those together and make sure they're matched. Same thing here. We're going to clip the corners together. And then the rest of the curves, they just fit right inside of each other. It gets a little full here and kind of thick, but you get through it with sewing. So when you're sewing around this head, a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, my main thing is I want to make sure that I don't catch the ears. So I'm going to push the ears away from my sewing. Looking cute so far. Next, I'm going to take the muzzle right sides down, touching the front of the head. So right sides together. And I'm going to match this corner to the edge there, or that seam. Same thing on this side. I'm going to match the seams and I'm going to just sew right across. And I won't bring you over to the sewing machine because it's so easy. Once I have the top sewn, now I'm just going to work with the curve. I'm going to follow the curve and you're going to just have to sometimes stretch a little your fabric to get it to fit all the way around. And you'll see that the face, the side face has the curve. You're going to straighten out that curve so it goes right along the muzzle. Same thing on this end, making sure that the corners match. And then again, with the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to sew what you just clipped there. And the floppy bunny face is starting to come together. You could see it here. Now I'm going to add the plastic eyes, but if you're giving this to a little child, I do recommend embroidering the eyes. So I've linked below these plastic eyes that I've purchased and where you can get them as well. And now I'm going to look for that dot, and I'm just going to puncture a little hole here with my seam ripper, and I'm going to fit it right in and get the back to clip right onto it. I could use a plastic nose, but I decided to cut out a brown nose out of felt because I kind of wanted the entire thing a bit more soft. And I'm going to sew this in place with a back stitch all around the nose. And then I'll embroider with embroidery thread the mouth marks. So here's how you do a running stitch. As you move forward, before you go again, you back up into that last spot where you made your last stitch. See, before I move forward, I back up and put my needle into the last stitch. I'll show it to you better, or it's clearer when I'm using the embroidery floss in a moment. I'm going to embroider the mouth, so I'm using embroidery floss with a larger needle, so the embroidery floss fits through the eye of the needle, and I'm going to just double knot the ends, and I'll show you again here how I create the mouth using a back stitch. Next, I'm going to make the legs. So with the inner leg pieces, I'm going to take the tops here and I'm going to connect these two pieces up here, these two open pieces, straight line across, back stitching on the ends. I have these sewn together, so I'm going to take them right sides together onto the outer leg. So I'm going to take one inner leg and put it right sides together to the matching outer leg, and I'm going to pin it all the way around, or actually clip it all the way around. Now that they're clipped together, I'm going to sew all around except the bottom of the leg. So I'm going to follow these curves, back stitching here, and I'm going to leave the bottom open. The leg sewn and turned wrong side out, I'm going to take the foot pads, and where I made these little snip marks on top, I'm going to use that to match them exactly where they fit. So I'm going to make that seam match the little snip mark here, and I'm going to clip it in place. And I'm going to also clip next the back seam mark to the clip. I like to match the seams first and then I match the rest. And of course, as you've guessed, with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to sew around to attach the foot pads. Next, I'm working on the torso. So this is where the writing on the pattern really helps me. So we're going to work with the leg area. So this leg hole here, we're going to bring these two bottom areas here together, right sides together, and sew it closed with back stitching on the ends. Really quick, really simple. To attach the leg to the torso, I'm going to make sure the tummy area here, the foot faces the tummy. So that's how you know you have the right leg. That foot is facing the tummy. And then once you have it that way, what I'm going to do is flip it all the way around this way, so I'm looking at it wrong sides, and I'm going to take this seam here and match it with the seam on the outer leg, or the leg itself. You see a seam there, you're going to match it up to this one right here. I'm going to clip it right in place, and then the rest of it, or the rest of this rounded area here, fits perfectly right in place. And then carefully at the sewing machine, I'm going to sew all around, making sure none of the other parts of the leg don't fold in and I accidentally sew it, because that can happen to just even the best sewers. Cute, it's coming together. The legs are attached to the torso. I'm creating the arms next, and I'll have them right sides together, pin all around or clip all around, and then I will sew, leaving the top open. In a similar way that we attached the leg, we're going to attach the arm. But first, I'm going to sew together the opening up here, and the same on the other one, back stitching on the ends. I'm making sure my arm faces the tummy. So the hand is pointing the same direction as the tummy, and I'm going to match the seam here to the seam here. So putting it from the right sides, and I'm going to look at it from the wrong sides, I'm going to slip it in through the hole, matching the seams here, clip, just like I did to the leg, and then sew around with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So before sewing these two pieces together, I am going to make my marking that I forgot to do in the beginning of where my openings are. So you probably made dots if you're following along, but I'm going to just make these marks here to remind me wide enough for my hand to fit in. This is where I don't sew, and I can also stuff and turn the floppy bunny around. So next I'm going to bring the two torso pieces together. So in order to help me out, I'm going to make sure that the tummy and the back match. But before I do this, I'm just going to stuff the leg and the arm in just a little. I'm not going to push them in all the way so they're totally wrong sides out. Just a little, just to get them out of the way so they're not in my way when I sew. And I'm going to make sure the tummy matches the tummy and the back matches the back. So as you're clipping here, make note of those dots you made on the back for the opening, because we don't want to sew that close, because that's where we're going to turn this entire bunny right side out, and we're going to use it for stuffing. Mine is not marked here, and my apologies, I made that mistake. Okay, so this point here, this is where we're going to start sewing on the tummy area. We're going to leave the top part open and we're going to sew all the way around. And don't forget to leave the opening for the stuffing, because I'm totally forgetting to tell you here. And then we're going to stop sewing right up here at the top here. So I'm showing you on the paper pattern. Now I'm turning it right side out just to see the progress and if everything looks good. Then after I check it all out and it looks cute, I'm going to flip it back wrong sides out, because we're going to have to attach the head. And we need the body wrong sides out to do that. So now that I have this in place, I'm going to take the head and I'm going to make sure the face faces the tummy. So you have to make sure your face faces the tummy. And I'm going to slip it in, and notice the head is right side out. And I'm going to take the back head seam and I'm going to match it to the back seam here. And then I'm going to go around matching the seams here, clipping that in place and matching this other side seam, and then the rest just fits right in place. And now for the best part of all, turning it right sides together. Pretty much complete. Now let's stuff this fluffy bunny. I'm not going to overstuff it because I kind of want it squishy and soft and floppy, really. But first, what I'm going to do is stuff the head, then the arms, the legs next, and last the torso. I like how my floppy bunny feels. So what I'm going to do next is close this opening in the back. And when you're working with the Sherpa fleece, you could do any kind of overcast stitch, even like a blanket stitch, because you really don't see it with the Sherpa pile. To make the tail, I have a double threaded sewing needle with a double knot at the end, and I'm doing a nice sort of loose basting stitch all the way around. And you can see as I'm pulling it, it's scrunching into a ball, and I'm going to stuff it and then close it up. Now to close it, I do these stitches where I begin on one side and go across to the other, and I just do random ones all around so that it really closes this opening and it feels secure. With a double threaded needle knotted at the ends, I'm going to attach the tail this way. I'm going to grab a little of the bunny's back and go right into the tail and keep doing the stitch all the way around the tail, but I'm going to keep the stitches together so that it holds much tighter to the body. And the last thing is the bow. You can use any kind of bow you want. I didn't have the correct ribbon bow I wanted, so I just took this polyester fabric, which measures almost about 8 inches, I'd say 7.5 wide by 40, let me see here, 46 long. Yours could be shorter, it could be smaller, it could be thinner, it could be anything. So here's how I make my hand sewn bows. I'm going to sew on a diagonal and come all the way down here. I'm going to leave an opening. I'll show you in a second. And then when I get to the end, of course, I'm going to pin it when I sew. I'm going to do another diagonal at the end. And I'm going to leave an opening, back stitching on those ends there. And this is exactly what I mean. I did a little trimming. Here is my opening and the edge. So now I'm going to turn it right side out. I didn't want a traditional looking bow here, so I'm just trying to do something different. So again, if you're giving this to a baby, consider sewing the bow on as well so it doesn't come off. And that is how I put together my Floppy Bunny soft toy. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comments below. I will get back to you as soon as possible. And thank you so much for watching this video. If you love videos like this, go ahead and check out the other tutorials right up here on the screen. Thanks again for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe.